Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Eminette, and I am a member of the Flute New Music Consortium. Today, we have an interview with composer J.P. Merz. Merz or Merz?
The German pronunciation is Merz, but my family says Merz for some
Oh,
reason.
Merz. Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
married to a German and speak German, so
Yeah.
that's why I went with Merz. Okay. All right. And JP wrote the piece Drops on a Living Surface, and it was the winner of the 2017 Flute New Music Consortium Flute Duo category. So, JP, tell us a little bit about yourself and your musical background, your current activities, and where you're coming to us from today.
Sure. I'm currently living in LA. I just started my doctorate at the University of Southern California in this fall. And I grew up in Janesville, Wisconsin, so in southern Wisconsin.
Wow.
When I was there, I was, playing viola in orchestra, and I was playing guitar, like electric guitar in rock bands, jazz bands, all sorts of bands.
Cool.
And then I was also making weird sounds in GarageBand, like on my like home computer. And so I was, and kind of composing here and there, in all these sorts of ways. Writing little things for the orchestra, writing all the songs for my bands. And I just didn't really know what being a composer really was. I just
Mm-hmm.
thought that was like, I don't know. I just, in southern Wisconsin, you just don't have like a sense of what that is. But I decided, I wanted to go to music school, and I like had to learn classical guitar to like get into school.
Wow.
So I started taking lessons my senior year and did that. And I went to Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
and so there I was studying classical and jazz guitar a lot, and kind of struggling with like, well, am I going to be playing other people's music all my life?
Mm-hmm.
And when I had grown up making my own music in all these different contexts, so but I was interested in all these different styles, and being exposed to a lot of new things, and so composition kind of seemed like a way to for me to combine all those interests into like a practice that I could hopefully make a living out of at some
Yeah.
point. And so since then, I did my master's in Boulder, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, I wrote a lot of pieces for the musicians there. Have some great friends from there, and continue to work with them. I also worked with the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art in a couple of different roles while I was there. Sometimes as an artist, sometimes as a technical director of this festival they have. This year, I'm orchestrating an arrangement, or like arranging a bunch of music for a band that's playing with an orchestra.
Wow.
So I've kind of like found a way to occupy different roles there. I lived in Minneapolis for a little bit, and interned with this awesome organization called Liquid Music,
Oh, yeah.
which is part of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. Oh, bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
And
A lot of pollen down here in
yeah,
Atlanta.
um, and so yeah, and then just this year I moved to LA. So I've moved around quite a bit. I'm happy to be kind of staying in one place for a little while I do my doctorate. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you have a lot of different artistic influences that you like experimenting with, and that has maybe inspired you with some of your composition.
Yeah, I've tried to like make a balance of like doing. I love contemporary art, and I have gone to a lot of museums, and have a lot of friends that work in that world, and so I've kind of tried to have like a little foot in like the sound art world,
Mm-hmm.
and also in like the new music world, and I'm still trying to figure out like how those can work together. And yeah, so I've made a couple of like installation pieces as well, and kind of try to do a bit more of that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really neat. Okay, now let's talk about your piece for Two Piccolos, Drops on a Living Surface. What was your inspiration behind that piece, and what was your process for composing it?
Sure. So at the time, and I was listening to a lot of, I don't know if you know this composer, Tristan Parrish, but
I
he
don't.
makes these pieces for one bit electronics. And so there's like all these like raw speaker cones that he places around the concert hall, and then these like custom one bit sounds. But it's kind of what I was interested in his work is just this questioning of the relationship between the performer and the loudspeaker, and like what that is about, rather than just like treating it like accompaniment,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it like as an active um, like you know like force in the music. So
Uh-huh.
and there's lots of other composers who have done that, and kind of checking out their work. So it's kind of the idea with the piece was like, okay, the flutists are playing and like triggering these like little sparkly sounds in the electronics, and kind of like, and sometimes it's a very direct relationship, and sometimes it's a less direct relationship.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the premise of the piece. I The way this piece came about was it was my last year at Lawrence,
Uh-huh.
and they were wanted to do a collaboration between the flute studio and the composition studio,
Mm-hmm.
and I had just finished writing a piece for flute and electronics. So I was like, well, I can't write another flute and electronics piece.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what could be like an interesting challenge? So I
Huh.
was like, Piccolo duo. uh, so, which is like, I don't know any other Piccolo duo pieces. They probably exist, but
Uh-huh.
that was, my way of getting myself out of my comfort zone, and trying some new things. And the musicians who I worked with, Caitlin Winker and Leo Sussman,
Mm-hmm.
I worked with them really closely, and got to try out a lot of things, and it was kind of a real workshop process. So they kind of had a bit of input on how the piece was notated, and even came up with some solutions for what kind of sounds were being played. So yeah, that was kind of the story of that piece. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Very collaborative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And so how did you start? You just started writing, thinking about what was your process, your compositional process for
Sure.
this?
Yeah, so I had like made this max patch that like when I make sound, it would like kind of oscillate through these different like synthesized tones
Mm-hmm.
basically, and then kind of playing with like, okay, I can make it be triggering sine waves, or I could make it be triggering sawtooth waves. I could put filters on those things and to kind of change the sound. um, and so yeah, it started out by making like that patch,
Mm-hmm.
and then just kind of like, I think I was probably like playing on melodica like into the patch, and kind of trying out ideas.
Uh-huh.
And so and yeah, so that was kind of how the process went. And eventually I kind of and in the piece there's also some pre-recorded
Mm-hmm.
material that gets triggered, and a lot of that is coming from like a bunch of recordings I have of Piccolo's playing. So I
Oh,
kind of
neat.
recorded them, and some of it's kind of like stretched out. There's some like really long like vibrato when you slow it way down. There's stuff like that in there. So yeah, and then the process was just kind of like figuring out, okay, here are these different scenes of the different relationships to the max patch basically,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're triggering it, and then what kind of music like is interesting to fit into those scenes basically. So
Oh, neat. Cool process.
uh,
So, as far as being a composer, since you've worn so many different hats, right? Being a musician and doing all of these different things, who has inspired you most as a composer?
yeah, I feel like there are two answers to this question. There's
Mm-hmm.
like the nerdy version, which I'll give first, which is like Early on, I feel like Meredith Monk was like a composer that really like blew my mind. And just kind of the way she explores the timbres of the voice is really inspiring. There's a record label called Amsterdam Records in New York that I discovered early on when I was like a sophomore or something, and just like opened my mind up to like, it's okay to like write music influenced by rock or influenced by all these other things, and of course, like early minimalists, like Philip Glass, Steve Reich, they were also taking rock influence and pop influences into their music, and so like that made me see, okay, it doesn't have to just be this kind of like European connected tradition. So I'd say those people really inspired me early on. And then, kind of continuing forward, of course, the sappier answer is like my family, and my girlfriend, or cats, and my friends, collaborators, mentors. All those people really go into impacting how I compose and, who I am as a person. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they appreciate you mentioning them too, because oftentimes those folks get left out, but they are a big inspiration for us as artists, for sure. And then what did you like and what did you find challenging about writing for Flute/Piccolo?
Yeah, I'd say, like, in general, flutists are some of the most, like, enthusiastic performers of new music compared to especially, like, strings. Or, I mean, there's definitely exceptions to all of this, but, I'm sure there are flutists who don't like playing new music, but I have not met them. So, I really like writing for flutists because they bring so much. Usually, they bring so much like passion and so much creative, ideas to the table. And then of course, there's the like. I love the low register of the flute so much, and the low register of the piccolo specifically is like a very unusual sound, and we never get to hear it, and that's a challenging, especially in orchestral context. That's the big challenge of writing for the flute, is how do we get them to hear that low register of the flute, because it's so beautiful, and so that provides some interesting, everyone has a different solution to that problem, and I think that's what it's both a challenge, but it's also like what I like the most about it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's really cool. And was there anything in particular with the piccolo that you found to be particularly interesting or challenging other than that low register?
Yeah, I feel like, the challenge was I wanted to go up into the high register, but how do I make that not be like really piercing, especially in a chamber context?
Sure.
And so part of that was like balancing it out with the electronics. And I'm trying to remember some of the challenges we ran into in playing the piece. There's one section where they're in octaves, and it's kind of hard to tune piccolos in octaves.
Yes, it is.
But I kind of like the way they did it, and I kind of like the out of tuneness a little bit. So, I thought that was it. Yeah, it was an interesting challenge, and I think it works out. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. It shows that we're humans, right, and not an electronic recording. Yeah, for sure. And is there anything that you have coming up that you'd like to promote or tell everybody about?
Well, I did just write a piece for this group called Y Music in New York, and that video and recording will be out soon. And hopefully, I think there might be some more things related to that coming out. I have some friends who have albums that they just put out. Leslie Smucker is a violinist in Boulder. She has an album called Persona, and that has a piece of mine on it. There's a group it was more of a recording project. And they did a couple of concerts called Lilith, and they just released an album on National Sawdust Records, and that has a piece of mine on it as well. And then I just have some like bigger collaborative projects that I'm working on with this new media researcher named Maya Livio. So I guess stay tuned for those. One of them is like a string quartet. The one that's the most closest to being done is a string quartet that is being played for this. There's this thing called a baby pod. So she research one of her research projects is technology for women's bodies. And so like looking at the history of like birth control and the history of all these different technologies, and then like some new like media tech devices that are being marketed towards women, and so one of those devices is called a baby pod, and it's a speaker that you're supposed to play to your unborn fetus, and so it just kind of like and it kind of plays into this like baby Einstein thing of like you have to like prepare your child, and like classical music is like the best thing for it, but then also like she's kind of ironically like taking it a step further. Like it's not enough to like play your baby classical music. Now you have to like commission string quartet for your unborn fetus.
That's kind of cool.
But also kind of at the same time like honoring the like eggs that don't become children.
Oh my gosh,
so
that's
there's kind of like two sides to it, and so there's going to be a whole project related to that, and she can talk about it, and it's like her idea. I'm just like the composer who's writing the piece. So yeah.
Oh, that's really great. Lots of work. It sounds like that you're doing now, and lots of projects and getting your music played. So that's the best thing that I think a composer can ask for. So that's really great. All right. Well, thank you so much, JP, for talking with me about your piece and about your life and about your career. And I know that the flute world will expect to see more of your work in the future.
Yeah, there is a flute and piano piece that the details aren't hammered out yet, but stay tuned for that. So.
Okay, we definitely will. All right. Well, thank you so much.